For more on that is Clay Biles. He is a former U.S. Navy SEAL, Air Marshal, and author of the United States Federal Air Marshal Service, A Historical Perspective. Clay, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here.
So as Ali just reported, a source with the TSA, around 5% of all flights have an air marshal on board, with thousands of flights per day. Can passengers feel safe on flights with just 5% of them covered by an air marshal?
Well, I think the 5% number is a little high. I mean, I think if people were to really look at the numbers, and really the armorers of the Air Marshal Service really know what that number is because they issue the firearms to the Air Marshals, you're probably looking at less than 1% of domestic flights covered in the United States.
Less than 1%, my goodness. So what are the Air Marshals going to do? I was reading that the president of the Air Marshal National Council says, we're not doing this. They might mutiny. Is that within the realm of possibility, or is that just talk right now?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the Air Marshal Service morale has really been run into the ground for a couple decades now, and I think the people that are in there doing the job, they're really, I mean, they need support, and I do see that a mutiny would be possible if they're forced to do things that's not within their purview. And I think that putting air marshals on the border is a really big liability because they're not trained for that job, and it really puts the public at risk for liability, legal liability, immigrants at risk, and also the air marshals themselves.
Well, yeah, I found that interesting. The Biden administration's position is essentially that this is federal law enforcement. We need as much federal law enforcement as we can at the border, and we need fewer people in the air because we need them at the border. What do you make of the idea that you should be trained in this because you are federal law enforcement, and this is part of the job description, whether or not you see it that way?
Yeah, but the federal law enforcement part, that side of the air marshals really is to give them the ability to make arrests. I mean, they are really counter-terrorists. They're trained to retake that aircraft, rehijack that aircraft to deal with certain threats on board. And we've seen an uptick in that. We've seen an individual holding a razor blade to a passenger's throat, and also an attempted breach on the aircraft. And I think really, it's good to educate, I think, the public on if you are in an aircraft and you decide to hold a straight razor to somebody's throat, what you could expect if an air marshal team is on board, and it might surprise the public what would happen, and that is their job. Their job is to have a counterterrorism role. The law enforcement side that is really. They're not trained for that southern border role.
Yeah, it is definitely different to be down at the southern border and do that. But how active are air marshals normally? You mentioned less than 1%. Is that a current figure, or is that the next figure once these marshals are redeployed to the border and doing something else?
No, that would probably be the current number, because you have a lot of air marshals that don't fly. Their management, they sit in the office and they just run a team. They really don't do much of anything. And then you have people that are on time off. You have people that are on vacation. You have a lot of people around the country that are air marshals, but what we call them as flyers is we call them chair marshals. So they really don't do anything. So there are a large number of air marshals, yes, but there's a very large percentage of those air marshals that don't actually fly missions.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.